Welcome to the Subconscious Elements Podcast, a podcast where me and my co-host Tori, we talk about everything spirituality, whether it's movies, books, myths, relationships. And we use this podcast to essentially discuss ideas and concepts that allow us to kind of get further insight on them. And today we're going over the 13th gene key. And just a reminder of what the gene keys are, they're essentially 64 keys, each corresponding to a specific genetic pattern or archetype. And these allow you to get an insight onto your life's purpose, your relationships, and your overall life. It kind of like allows you to contemplate and reflect on these archetypes and patterns that we all have, which will allow you to reach your highest potential. So it's essentially a way to understand like life's myths, whether it's the story of Hercules or, the story of Moses, Jesus, Judas. All these stories are events and archetypes that happen to us, and reading about them allows you to get an insight into your own life. And so that's what we're doing. And I'll let you kick it off with the 13th gene key.
All right. So the 13th gene key at the shadow frequency, we have discord. And this is basically when the human consciousness gets tied up in desire and moves through life following desire unconsciously. So kind of getting pulled along rather than making the conscious decisions in their life without that tie. And after transmuting the discord, you move towards the gift frequency, which is discernment. And discernment is where you reach this third person perspective on your life. And you're no longer reacting and responding from a emotional side and standpoint. And then you have at the Siddhi frequency, empathy. And empathy is basically whenever you can relate to someone so deeply that the separation no longer exists. So it's basically to where instead of understanding what someone is going through, you more and so step into their shoes and understand from their point of view what exactly they're going through. Yeah, so the 13th gene key, it is in the ring of purification. And I definitely can relate to this with my most recent experience with plant medicine. That basically, in order to reach this purified state, you must move through fear and all of the unconscious desires and behaviors that can control your life. And it can be a very scary process. But at the end of this, you can reach that higher state and level of consciousness and be purified in that sense. And its programming partner is the 7th gene key. And basically it was saying that the 7th gene key ties us to the future and the 13th gene key ties us to our past. And through understanding the past that has happened to us personally, we can transmute that into a better future version.
Right. Yeah, so it was explaining how like discord is essentially the inability and unwillingness to listen to oneself or others. And I feel like we all know somebody that doesn't listen. And it ties it to desire. Like essentially you're unwilling to listen because of your own desires. And, it becomes so, I guess the best way that I can relate to it. So discord is essentially the inability or unwillingness to listen to others. And I think we've all felt that coming from someone where they essentially only give you enough time to speak so that they can then have their turn, or that they're listening to you and essentially not even actually listening to what you're saying. They're just preparing what they're going to say next. And one of the things that irks me the most is when someone asks me a question and they're only asking me not to actually hear what I think about it. They just want to tell me what they think about it. One of the most frustrating things ever. It's like, dude, don't ask me if all you're going to do is blurt out what you think. Like, just tell me what you think. Don't pretend to care about what I think. Because it's so annoying when someone's like, oh, so what do you think about this? And then you're getting into what you think about it. And then they just cut you off and start telling you what they think about it. I literally would just like stare at them like, cool, dude. And then just either leave or change the subject. And that's probably not the most empathetic way to handle the situation, but it's like a silly little pet peeve. It's like, if you ask someone a question, are you genuinely interested in what they're saying? Like, otherwise, don't ask the question. I'd rather it'd be more genuine if you approached it and like, dude, I've been listening about this and it's got me thinking in this way. Not like, hey, what do you think about this? Oh, that's cool. Well, so anyways, what I was thinking was blah, 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 blah. It's like, yeah, super frustrating. But I feel like that's kind of what it's getting into, is like this discord of essentially you're having a conversation with someone, but you're unwilling to even hear their perspective. You're just using the dialogue so that you can force your perspective onto them. And as funny is like, I feel like we do that to each other all the time. Like, I'm not talking about our relationship, I'm talking about just like friends and stuff, but we do that same thing to each other. Like when we argue, where it's like, we hear the other person's perspective and we're just like, yeah, well, that doesn't matter according to what I think. So it definitely applies to like a bunch of different relationships that you can have, whether it's your family, your friends, your significant other.
Yeah, it was saying that it also relates to the gut, and it says that because you are unable to process your past, you will then have equivalent issues with processing things in the gut. And yeah, you can see that with people that are unhealthy and their patterns of communication and how they move through patterns in their life that can be harming to the self. And it can be directly related to the patterns of the mind and speech. And I think that people also undervalue the words themselves. And like you're saying, like they'll create a whole conversation that was only for them to say what they wanted to say. And it's like, doesn't come off authentically. And so it's just like too many words, in my opinion. And people aren't very selective in how they say things or what they're saying. And so it's just like an unconscious behavior that people perpetuate in their lives they're not aware of.
Talking about the discord, it had two different types of natures.
Yeah.
A lot of times it goes over reactive. The repressive and reactive nature. So the repressive nature was being permissive, which is always agreeing with someone. And like, you're essentially not even actually taking in what the person's saying. You're just like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. Oh yeah. Like just taking their side just for the sake of being their friend. And I feel like I've definitely experienced that, where sometimes people essentially learn how to be someone's friend. And then they just use that to gain popularity. So they're like, they come up with these little tactics to like win you over. And I feel like you do need to know that stuff. Like, you have to know how to like get someone to open up and, get them to kind of like understand that you're not a threat. So I definitely understand that skill. But then some people abuse it to where they're just doing it all the time, where they're just like, trying too hard to be cool with you. It's like, dude, relax, bro, relax. Like, you don't have to be my friend. Like, and I know that might seem silly to say, but I definitely met some people where they're just like, they'll compliment anything, And I think we've actually, I think we've met someone like that, where they come up with a compliment, like an offhand compliment, and you'll hear them say it to multiple people. Like, every time they meet someone, they just come up with a compliment, and then you realize that they just learned this thing, and they're like, oh, in order to make someone my friend, I must pick something out about them and say, oh, I like this about you. And then they'll say the same thing like multiple times, and you're kind of just like, you've already mentioned this to me, And it's like, if you really did like something, it's like, it's hard. I find it hard to believe that you're experiencing this for the first time again, and then making the compliment genuine. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I know people like that for sure. Where it can come off as too much. And
it
puts you off on this. It's like,
right. Or so like a classic one is, I feel like you see this more with women, but they'll just be like, oh my gosh, nice hair. And then they're just doing it to everybody. Like, oh my gosh, I love this about you. And it's like, at first, it might seem genuine, but then after a while, they're doing it to you every time. And you're like, dude, relax. I don't know if you notice that, but I notice a lot of women where they like, as soon as they see another girl, like, oh my gosh, like your hair. And then just go back to like being snobby. I don't know.
Yep, that is a shadow characteristic of most women, I feel like. And they're not even aware of it, honestly. It's like you should try to make a genuine connection with something that feels true to you.
Yeah. No, 100%. It's like, yeah, don't just compliment something random. Like, that's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is like, if you really do appreciate what someone is doing or something about someone, then yeah, letting them know is awesome, because I feel like we definitely don't do that enough. But when you're like, got a little checkbox, it's been like, oh, meet someone, make sure I compliment something about their body because it'll make them feel better about themselves and they'll be way more likely to be my friend. It's like, that's weird. Like, don't do that, because like I said, the people that do that, they essentially don't even remember that they did that the last time. And then they'll make the same compliment about the same thing. And you're like, it's not even something to be complimented. They'll be like, oh, I love your glasses. And you're like, oh yeah, I've had them for 6 years. They're old and falling apart, but thanks. And then they see you again and they're like, oh, I love your glasses. And you're like, yeah, no, you said that the last time. That, it's like, and then they meet someone else and they're like, oh, I love this. And it's like, dude, you literally love it. Is that like a thing? And you're just like, oh, I must find something I love about them and let them know. Like, that's just weird to me. But that it kind of like, it's interesting to be able to relate to like these repressive or these words that they're using, like these natures. So you can kind of like categorize, like, what exactly does it mean by these different things?
Yeah, I will say that I have personal experience mostly with repressive natures rather than the reactive natures. And what really struck a chord with me when listening to the repressive nature was the cutting oneself off from emotional experience. And so you just like, you no longer want to experience a high or low, so you choose no experience at all. And so it's basically just like no pain, no pleasure type of thing. So you're just like in the middle and you don't really have any expression. And it's like, I can reside there very often because it's just like too much effort for me sometimes, especially in this super stimulating environment, to react in one way. So I'll just be super mellow. And some people can be put off by that, but it's like, honestly, it feels too taxing on my energetic system in order to give an overreactive, excited state all the time. And people be like, oh, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm fine. I'm just not always in an ecstatic state, I'm just on a baseline mellow. Like, I'm not high or low. I'm just chilling.
Yeah. No, I think, I think we all go through that for sure. I've definitely been mellowed out sometimes. And it's just like, what's wrong with you? Nothing. And then the reactive nature, I feel like you might see like the repressive and the reactive can almost be like a feminine, masculine type of thing. Obviously, we embody both, but the reactive nature, it was saying how a lot of times can like come out as like anger. And a lot of times you'll see that in dudes. But it was essentially saying the reactive nature is like narrow-mindedness and pessimism, and that they essentially won't agree with anybody. And I can't think off the top of my head of anyone like that specifically, but, or no, I guess maybe it's like those people who are always trying to argue with you. Actually, you know what? Come to think of it. Like, I do know somebody.
I definitely know a lot of people like that, honestly.
Yeah,
where they're like unwilling to give in a situation. And they only want to hear their opinion and their opinion validated. And it says like any sliver of optimism, they just shut down immediately. Yeah, we know somebody from back where we used to live that was like that. Always negative. And you're like, dude, not everything we say has to be put into a negative spin. Like, I understand there are positives and negatives to each reality, but the more that you focus on the negative, the more you'll perpetuate that in your life. So why would you choose to think pessimistically when you can choose to think optimistically? And when someone is presenting an optimistic point of view, the best thing you can do is go with it, because it's like a free ride to good thoughts. It's like they're providing already positive energy. So why would you just try to tear them down? It doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the idea of going from pessimism to optimism is essentially just like it's saying it's narrow-mindedness, right? And the ability or this idea that you have to argue with everyone. And yeah, well, it's like essentially they're not willing to let the idea play out. It's like, you don't have to shut it down, dude. You don't have to accept my idea as truth. It's like, if you ask me too, the only way to look at it is to be optimistic. Like, to be pessimistic about something means that you're really not being grateful for the present moment. When I remember speaking to someone specifically, and I was just trying to tell them about one of the laws of life, one of the Hermetic principles, is this idea that the law of rhythm, that everything moves in ups and downs, and that I think it's two things, right? It's the law of rhythm and the
Vibration?
No, I think it is rhythm. Like, everything is swinging back and forth. And so this idea that if things are low for you, then they must inevitably come back up. You know, I was explaining it to this person and they're like, "Oh, well, I'm just still waiting on the ups to happen." And it's like, you have a job, you have a home, you have family. What are your downs? You know, it's like, truly, if you really think about it, what could your downs be? Like, yeah, yes, you have downs, but are your downs as down as some other people? No, right? So it's like, I think that, again, going from pessimism to optimism is a matter of being grateful, which you could argue is like almost like I wouldn't say an intelligence test, but you have to have some type of awareness to be like, things aren't that bad. And if things aren't that bad, I mean, how can you perceive the tops of something if you're only looking at the negative, right? It's like, in order to see the highs and lows, you have to first be aware of, I mean, I guess you could even argue there really are no lows, really, if you really think about it, right? Like that idea of there's no such thing as good or bad. And I think we're going to get into that in a little bit with the myths. But if there's no good or bad, right? Highs and lows are only a perspective. So if you can just change your perspective, you can really see the rhythm of life. And so, it just kind of, I wouldn't say it bothers me. It just makes me feel bad when someone's like, "I'm still waiting on the ups." And it's like, then I can't even really communicate to this person yet because I don't have the perspective or the awareness to be grateful for like the most basic things in life. It's like, that person isn't in a state to really listen to me when I'm like, if I try to tell them about like all the things they should be grateful for, they're not even in that state yet. They're worried about something else in their lives, which is, I'm pretty sure it was like closer to like a love life thing where like, they're not getting the significant other or the date that they want. So in their mind, everything is terrible. And then maybe they're living with their parents and it's driving them crazy, so they're like caught up in all this emotional level of, oh, the guy that they want or the girl they want isn't responding or isn't texting them back. And, their parents are driving them crazy because they're living with their parents. And obviously the job they have isn't the best job in the world. And it's like, I can definitely understand being caught up in the drama of all that. But at the base of it, it's like, you're able to live with your parents. You at least have people that are interested in you. Like some people don't have anybody interested in them. They're not getting any type of play, and then, you have a job. It's not the best job, but it's a job. There are people looking for a job. There are people that wish they had this job and they can't have it because they don't speak English or whatever. It's like so easy to just like flip the script. But if you flip the script on them like that and like kind of tell them like that, they most likely won't listen, right? That's kind of what this thing is saying.
Yeah. So, fear and unwillingness to face your fears is what perpetuates this state. And fear kills the light inside and you can be left in the darkness. And it's saying like with empathy, you can really be like a positive influence on someone in this state, even though they are like dragging you down in a sense. Like you can still sympathize or empathize with them by going into that dark place with them and helping them find that light.
Mm.
And the more that they face the fears, the higher they'll be able to go. Like you said, it's ups and downs. And I just recently experienced that. It was like forcing me to face all the fears in all consciousness, the collective consciousness, not just my personal consciousness, but fears that all of humanity experiences in the face of myself. So it's like it was specifically curated so my mind could understand and be more like attached to it, and I would have more of an emotional tie to it. But in the sense that it's a fear that wasn't even mine, it was just a fear that exists, and I was tapping into it. And it's like, why would you need to tap into something like that? Or why would you even want to do something like that? And it's like, so that energy can be released. It's like, I'm not doing it necessarily for me personally. I'm doing it for the collective consciousness. Like, the more work that I do and the more deeper I dive, that allows others to be free and these energies to be free. And for them to be detached from everyone. It's not just for myself.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely had like a moment too where someone's done it to me where I was being pessimistic about something and someone flipped the script on me and I was just like, you're right. And I'm glad that he actually told me. Like, so when someone was being super pessimistic with me, I wasn't able to like really connect to them and help them flip it. But one time I was complaining to Victor, my jiu-jitsu coach, about my ID situation. Like I was trying to get my state ID and I was going through this process and I had it sent out and then my brother was supposed to send it to me. He never does. So then I got to go back and then they're making it be super difficult. And it's like literally like my fourth time to go to the DMV and it's like 45 minutes away. They want you to be there early. I end up being there for half a day. I'm tired every time I got to do it. And I'm like, coach, I got to go back and get my ID. This is so annoying. It's like, they want me to drive and it's going to be gone. I'm so annoyed. I just want to train. And he was like, all you got to do is drive to the thing and get it taken care of and you get an ID. He's like, bro, it took me 8 years to get an ID. What are you complaining about? He's like, dude, in order for me to get ID, I had to pay for a lawyer. I had to do this, I had to do that, I had to do this. And I was just like, he's like, and all you got to do is just drive there? He's like, dude, go drive there and get it done. It's not that big of a deal. And I was like, oh, you're right. I literally just drove to the DMV in silence, not a single complaint. But it's just like, yeah, he's totally right. There's people that wish they could get an ID and are trying their hardest to get one. And all I had to do is jump through some hurdles, like, hey, you gotta get your proof of address and you need to have these documents. And I got them. I'm just being lazy. And, and so, yeah, when he flipped it on me like that and told me like how hard it was for him to get a license and an ID, I was like, oh, you're right. At least I can get one, at least I'm part of this country and all I got to do is go show some proofs of identification. But I still feel like, you have to be in a place where you can even accept that,
Yeah. And unfortunately, like you said, most external influences cannot really have such a strong effect on yourself unless you're willing to accept help.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also have to be willing to help yourself. There's only so much that an external influence can do for you.
Mm-hmm.
The work has to be done internally. And these realizations have to come through experience, not through words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same thing in martial arts. 100%. Yeah, that was like one of the main words that was used to describe the repressive and reactive nature was narrow-mindedness. It's being open-minded that allows you to be like, oh, dang, I didn't see it that way. You're right. And, someone made a compliment to me the other day about, how good my jiu-jitsu instruction is. And then I mentioned it to you. And one of the first things you said is like, well, one, you still have a passion for the sport and a lot of instructors don't anymore. And then two, you're open-minded. And it was like, and it's so true. It's like, I'm not caught up in any type of dogma of how to teach. I like literally tell my students like, guys, I'm learning how to teach as much as you're learning how to learn. So we're working together to figure out the best way for all of us. And they completely understand that. And like the other day I was trying to help one of my students get the technique down and they were off and I couldn't really figure out what they were doing wrong. So I literally had them just like, all right, try it on this person. All right, try it on that person. All right, what are they missing right here? What do you think is wrong here? What do you think is wrong? What are they missing? And all together we were able to help this person to dial in their choke. And the next thing I know, all of them are like getting way better at the choke because they figured out like, oh, this person's wasn't that great because they were missing this detail. And like, all I got to do is type. They might have been getting it earlier and being able to apply a choke, but now everyone's getting more dialed in because you're watching how someone can go from literally not having you in a full choke and it's not choking you, where you're like, this isn't right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you're squeezing me, but there's not pressure, to literally being like, oh my God, I'm about to pass out. So, yeah, again, that open-mindedness, it's funny how something as simple as just being open to information can like completely change your personality and the way that you do things.
Yeah, for sure. And people just close off and they just stick in their patterns, and they don't even know that they're in a pattern, and they don't even know that there is a different way that they could be acting.
Doesn't this sound like Free Guy?
Yeah.
Remember, he's like trying to break out the people's patterns. They don't even know that they're in a pattern.
The Matrix.
Yeah. But so you want to move on to the gift of discernment?
Yeah, so the gift of discernment is whenever you become aware of the holds of desire. So desire is moving through you at all times, whether you like it or not. It's existing inside of you. And everyone experiences this in different forms. And just becoming aware that that energy moves through you and not acting on it. And seeing it from the third person perspective, like, yeah, I do really enjoy eating fast food, but I don't have to stop every single day. It's like everyone experiences this in a different way. Maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's drugs, maybe it's something, caffeine for me, honestly. So it's like, I don't need to drink 3 cups of coffee. It's like, do I want to drink 3 cups of coffee? Yeah, I definitely do. Do I want to eat 2 chocolate bars? Yeah, but you can't do that because it's unhealthy. And the more that you accept and act on these desires, the less healthy you'll be. And so you just want to live as long as you can, as healthy as you can, and serve and be in service. And you can't do that without a healthy vessel. And so becoming aware and consciously choosing your actions rather than falling victim of the waves and pulls.
So essentially, it's like a lot of those decisions are unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
We're just falling back into the patterns. Yeah, I got so discernment is the ability to deeply listen and distinguish between truth and illusion. And when you're able to do this, you're essentially able to navigate life with more clarity and make decisions that will align closer to the path that you want. And if you're wondering what that means, is like one of the podcasts I had with one of our friends, Damian Anderson, he was just saying about like picking where you want to be and then working your way back and planning things out. You know, that is the act of discernment, like deciding and choosing, actively choosing with a conscious mind, not just floating around of life and just making decisions. It's like, no, I have a plan. This is the way that I'm going, and I'm going to try to make decisions that will lead me to that goal, not just, you know, going day by day and just making random decisions. Right. And with zero intention. I feel like, you know, this past weekend has been a lot about like intention. Like, don't just do it to do it. What is your purpose for doing something? And we've learned a lot about like the intention behind something. I think that's probably one of the previous Gene Keys, right? Or maybe one of the movies that we covered, but just this idea that not only do you have the action, but the intention behind the action is just as important as the action itself.
Yeah, the importance of intentions is that there are beings on the other side, and they do want to help you, but you have to give them permission, and you have to give them very clear ways in which they can help you. And so being very specific, like for me, my main intention for this weekend was to become aware of the patterns that are no longer serving me and to transmute them and to become aware of them. And so that's exactly what happened. I literally asked that one intention, and that's exactly what happened. And I didn't expect it to happen the way it did. I did not know what was going to happen. I didn't think it was going to be that intense. I was like, you know, probably just like think about some things that happened to me in my past, and maybe I'll just feel sad and then I'll feel better. And it was so much more intense than I could ever imagine. And it's like being willing, regardless of the form that it takes, and understanding that it is going to heal you at the end. Like looking towards the light, even when you can't see it, it's like there's always hope.
Absolutely. You want to get into the Siddhi empathy?
Yeah.
So the Siddhic state is going to be empathy. So that's the higher level of the gift of discernment. And so empathy is being able to fully understand and share the feelings of another. And I feel like one of the easiest ways to really describe that is like walk a mile in someone's shoes. And even then, that's only like a very small perspective of what you're actually trying to do, right? Walking a mile in someone's shoes is only like still a very small, and if you really want to understand someone, you have to be able to take in their whole life, right? And there's this really powerful idea that, the only thing that really makes us different is our life circumstances. Like everyone's consciousness is relatively the same. And it's like the experiences that we come out through that really like makes us different and gives us this illusion of self. And so if you can imagine that if you had that person's exact same life, that you would be in their exact same shoes, like then you can understand that you can't really blame them, right? That they're just as lost in their own experience as we are. And if you've been in this life long enough, you know that this life is brutal. Like it's not easy for anyone. Even people with easy lives still have to go through, a lot of pain and suffering. And that's what, Earth is about. And that's what this experience is about, is not allowing yourself to be beaten down and to find new ways of living. And that can be so difficult, especially if you're alone in this world. It's like, me and you help each other out so much. It's like, you're half the reason I'm still going, And so, yeah, just being able to, if you're able to do that with someone else, you're less likely to be beaten down by some of these circumstances because you understand that if you were them, you'd be doing the same thing. And that you'd also be very grateful. You're like, man, like I really have, a place in my heart for the homeless because we've been homeless and, we've been there. And I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you've probably been homeless too. I think it's an experience that a lot of people go through where it's just like, hey, we're going to rough it in the car, and we're just grateful we got a car we can sleep in. And one of the things is like, I see the homeless and I feel for them because I know that, it only takes a couple bad decisions to be there. And I'm very lucky to have had a jump start from a place to where I can not have to worry about that, in a sense that like I came, even though, my childhood maybe wasn't the best or whatever, but it wasn't the worst. And if it was, and if I did come from the worst, maybe I would be there, It's like a lot of these homeless, it started out because they were in, we were paying for people to be in the
Mental
facilities until they just got rid of it. And then all these people just are now out on the street and there's just not enough money to house these people. So if you start to experience schizophrenia or any of these things, it's like you might get a little bit of help and then eventually you'll just be out on the street because you're not going to be able to hold a job. No one's going to want to live with you. No one's going to be able to help you because you won't be in the mind state to be helped. And then so now these people are almost seen as like, it reminds me of the movie of Divergent where I forget what they're called, but the factionless. And, it's like, man, I just feel for them. I feel for them. So, and that's, again, that idea of being able to put yourself inside of someone else and understand that that could be you. And at the highest level, that is you.
Well, yeah, that's like the old saying where it's like, the lights are on, but no one's home. It's like they're active, but you can't see the consciousness behind it because they're so beaten down by life and they're so stuck in their own ways that they are unable to find the light. And yeah, I experienced that with like what I mentally perceived as like a parasitic energy, where it's like we move through this world and we pick up on things, whether we understand it or not, and they can drain our energy systems and we might not even be aware of it. And these things can like attach themselves to us. And if you don't do any type of inner healing over time, it just compiles and compiles and it can just add up and lead you into a bad way. So that's why doing inner work is so important, because you don't even understand and it's not even necessarily your fault. It's just like things can latch on to certain people that they can prey on weak people, weak-minded people. So that's why you have to like build strength build resilience, and take control of your own life.
You essentially need a way to solve problems. I would even say you need a pattern of being able to deal with bad patterns. And what I mean by that is I relate it to jiu-jitsu. When we teach techniques, we want to actually teach them how to solve the problem that they're experiencing. And it's not like, oh, here's this thing. What I'm actually doing is showing you how to accomplish something. And a lot of times, so like, for example, when you're competing or when you're going really hard, when you're sparring really hard, you'll experience the room spinning. Sometimes you'll get really, really dizzy. And it's because your heart rate spikes. It's because your adrenaline spikes and you're experiencing a bunch of hormones that are being pumped through your brain because your heart rate just went from rest mode or maybe like 80 to 90 beats per minute to 160 really fast. And so you'll experience the room spinning. And this happens at all levels. Like at any time you can experience this. And the only thing that makes a difference between the black belt and the white belt, blue belt, purple belt, brown belt is that the black belt has an ingrained way or pattern of solving this issue. So it's not that I'm immune to experiencing this. I experience it, but I have a way of dealing with it. And it's so funny because I had someone else tell me the same thing too. They were telling me how the job that they have now, they could have did it 10 years ago. But the thing that they could not do 10 years ago was deal with all the social pressures of the job. He was like, yeah, if this person didn't like me and I had this job 10 years ago and someone didn't like me, I would be freaking out. I'd be so nervous and I'd be like, oh, well, what about this? Or I got to do this. He's like, now they're talking about this. I know to focus on the work. I know that whatever they're saying doesn't matter, that I'll show what I'm capable of through the work. And he's like, but 10 years ago, dude, I'd have been freaking out. And he's like, but now it's not even a big deal to me. And it like reminds me of like the same thing I'm experiencing in jiu-jitsu. It's like sometimes you gotta have the pattern to deal with it. So if the room starts spinning, what is my pattern? I catch my breath. I focus on my breath, start intaking as much air as possible and play the face of confidence. Hand fight and look straight in their eyes. Like you can't let them know that the room is spinning in your mind. So and then I have to tell myself that it only will last 20, 30 seconds. And it really only does. But in the 20, 30 seconds feels like forever, especially if you lean into it and you're not dealing with it. Like if you're just like, it just gets worse. But if you're just like, this is a part of it. This is a part of it. This is a part of it. Let's go, baby. Let's go, baby. I'm in this fight. It plays out completely different. And so again, like what you're saying is like, we all are going to develop these bad habits, these patterns, these negative energies that are coming to us. And the people that thrive and survive and thrive are the ones who have the tools to deal with it. Tools is a good word for it, to break the patterns. So going back to empathy, it was saying that empathy allows you to be a source of healing and wisdom, and that it will allow you to promote harmony on a greater scale. Now, promoting harmony on the greater scale, I'm not on that level yet. I'm not sure how exactly that happens. I think it kind of tunes into what you were saying earlier about, service and relieving,
collective fears and pressures.
Right. But I have experienced what empathy is, because it talks about how it's not a thing of the mind. It's a thing of like the heart. And I've felt that. One time I was riding my bike. I got a little electric bike. I just gotten it. And I'm riding it around town up in Cyprus. And man, I'm at a 4-way cross section and there's like red lights. So there's cars everywhere. There's like a line of cars and I'm like right in front of these cars. And I'm like trying to get on the road and get back to where I'm going. And I'm like looking both ways. And I didn't notice that as I turned, the curb was like my front tire cleared it, but not my back tire. And I was at a dead stop. And so when I took off, the back tire hit the curb and I just like fell over in like front of all these cars. And I just felt so silly. And I was like, pick up my bike and I ride real fast. I was like, hope no one saw me. Cause like the corniest thing is like, it's not like I was even going anywhere. I just like hopped on the bike and I just like fall right over. And it was just like the corniest thing ever. And the bike's like heavy, right? It's like an e-bike. So I'm like, and get on it. Well, fast forward literally like the next day I wake up and I'm like scrolling through Instagram and I see a video of Biden falling on his bike and everyone's making fun of him. It's like literally like all over Instagram and it was like, oh, he's old, blah, 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 blah. And I literally felt something in my heart. it was like, damn, like here's this guy I don't like. I don't like any of these politicians. They all make me angry. It makes me angry that somehow this dude's supposed to represent our country. Besides that though, yeah, so like again, I never had any like good emotions towards this person. I actually enjoyed laughing at him. And then I see him fall on his bike and seeing everyone make fun of him. And it's like, dang. Like again, it didn't come from my mind. I felt like something in my heart like open. And it was just like, for once, I didn't feel any type of bad emotions toward this person. I was just like, dude, we all fall on bikes, dude. You know? And yeah, again, it was like this moment where I could, for once, like relate to someone who was unrelatable, right? It's like before, I've never seen him in person. He's just this guy that comes across my phone. I don't even think I've seen him on TV. I've literally only ever seen this guy on my phone. And so, you know, and then of course, like, I don't actually know him. So the only things I know about him are what other people say about him and the quick cuts of him not being able to form sentences and all these things. And it's like, you know, I hear stories about how intelligent he is because he's been in the politics and been super successful for so long. And anyone with that much influence must have some type of extreme wisdom or knowledge. And I've heard those things, but I've never taken them seriously because I'm just still like, well, dude, someone's got to get this guy out of office or you can't be running the country, whatever. You know, whatever thoughts that I've unknowingly like absorbed from other people and just identified with it. And then and it's like, I literally was thinking like, why would that happen to me? When it happened, because I'm like, I was literally listening to Sad Guru on Audible. So, you know, I'm like super spiritual and I'm like, oh, everything happens for a reason. And I'm like, you know, and I literally remember thinking that night, like, man, if everything happens for a reason, why would I fall on my bike in front of everyone? That just sucked. What purpose could that serve? Next day, I see a viral clip of Biden falling on his bike. And it was like, I literally was like, dang. Anyway, yeah, I feel like that was like empathy. And it's funny. It's like I must have only experienced like some small aspect of that. And so imagine like that to a whole nother level, you know, where you could like do that with like all of humans, you know?
Yeah. My experience with the fear is whenever I was asking to release things that were no longer serving me, release the blockages, it was like a miniature death. And it's basically saying that you have to merge with the other and you basically leave your individual experience to experience the reality of the other. And so I felt like that was definitely true. And whenever I came back to my own mind and body, it's like I like blanked on my entire identity. It was like I didn't have an identity for a while. And I could feel it through my body, like almost not even understanding the habits and behaviors that exist in my body already and becoming familiar with those again. It was super interesting. It's like you leave your body, but like leaving your body is such a scary experience. Like you think it's going to be something like in a movie where you're actually flying or something, and it might not be like that. It was definitely not like that for me. But yeah, I was also saying that we have within our DNA, which is a vibrational living force within us, we have encoded all of the life forms that have existed prior and that will ever exist post our lifetime, encoded within our DNA, and that we can tap into this at any time, and that it's basically like a library of consciousness. And I definitely felt like that was true. I felt like I could ask the consciousness anything and it could give me an answer. But it's like a relationship that you have to develop, because the first night in our ceremony, like it was mostly just becoming familiar with the realm, the spiritual realm. Then once you're more familiar, because I was asking questions and no one was there, no one was answering, I was just alone. And then the next night I was asking questions and it was like the mother energy just being so patient with my silly questions. that are like tied to an individual perspective that doesn't even really matter in the grand scheme of things, but it also means everything in the grand scheme of things. So it's like, it means nothing and everything at the same time. And it's so minuscule. So it's pretty funny. I was just asking silly questions, and it was like, you can ask me more in-depth questions. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. A lot of the things it was talking about too in this book was the myths and how they play out in our lives. And it was essentially talking about how discernment and empathy all play a part in us understanding these myths. And because it talked about archetypes, patterns, and that these are all taught through myths so that we can understand ourselves. And if you wonder what that means, it's essentially like, to me, it reminds me of a cliche where it's like the secrets to life are in the cliches, and everyone knows the cliches, but no one listens to them. Everyone wants some like secret answer on like how to lose weight. You want to lose weight? Eat at a calorie deficit, eat your fruits and vegetables, and exercise. It's like that simple, but no one wants it to be that simple. They want some complicated answer. And I feel the same is true with the myths, where it's like we hear these myths and they tell us these like stories of how to live our life, but we just like, oh, it's just a story. But it's actually like trying to speak to something deeper about something that we might be going through or experiencing. And one of the best ways that I can explain that is one of my favorite stories is the story of Hercules. And one way that we would use that to teach others is this idea that, without the 13 challenges or the 13 monsters that Hercules defeated in order to become Hercules, like without those challenges and those monsters, he never becomes Hercules. He just is a regular dude. And so the idea is that, you're supposed to be searching for go find monsters, go find challenges to take out so that you can become Hercules. Like Hercules wasn't Hercules before those events. It's like the myth and the legend of Hercules was built through conquering challenges. And so it's like, Hercules isn't just a story about some god. It's a story about how you can take yourself to another level by finding challenges, by finding monsters and conquering it. And once you conquer those, you become a different person. Imagine conquering 13 different challenges. Like how much of a different person you would be if you did those things. Like, and I'm not saying like, I challenge myself to, post every day on social media. Not like that. I'm talking like challenge yourself to face a fear. Like imagine if you conquered 13 fears, 13 different things. And I'm not even saying conquer. What if you just forced yourself to experience the fear? I heard someone was telling me the other day that the fear is actually an unconscious pull to conquer it. Someone was telling me about that, and they're like, yeah, I have a great fear of heights, so I go cliff diving. And I was like, what, dude? And he was like, yeah, no, the fear of heights means that you have the subconscious will to get over it, and that you're actually not scared of it. That the fear is you being is like your distance from it or something along those lines. They explained it a lot better than I just did. And it was just, man, that was like so crazy to me because I have a fear of heights. And I remember, so I used to go to this bridge all the time, and I've even jumped off this bridge before. And I used to climb down into the things of this bridge and sit on top of like the pillars. There's like holes in the bridge where you could climb down onto the pillars and then just sit and hang off the pillar and just chill. And that was like the thing to do. It's like, let's go climb on the pillars. And people would jump from the pillars. I've only jumped off the bridge once, but people would jump off the pillar. People would jump off the bridge. I mean, just crazy stuff. And we would do it all the time. And I was scared back then, but I conquered it. And then when I took you back, I could barely walk on the bridge. We started walking on it, and I literally was like freaking out. And I would think and be like, oh, this is my stomping ground. Where I'd be all over these things. And then we get there and I'm like, my whole body's shaking. And I was just like, and I didn't get it. I literally didn't get it. I was like, maybe, I'm just not meant for heights. But then listening to this dude explain that it's like a subconscious thing to conquer, I was like, dang. And then again, it's just like, yeah, how much different would I be if I started conquering the fear of heights, Like, that's a whole nother level of stillness. There's a reason why people practice on like the, what is it? The still ropes? Yeah, the tight ropes and stuff. Anyway, and not only that one, there's another one that we were talking about when we were talking about good and bad. There's another classic story, and it's about a farmer. And it's this idea that, he goes through like this series of events, and, like one is he buys a horse, and the horse breaks his legs. And then people are like, oh, aren't you sad that your new horse broke his legs? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, I guess we'll find out. And then he gets a new horse. And then I essentially just talked about a couple of these different events, and they would be perceived at first to be really bad. And when people ask him if it's bad or good, he's just like, I don't know. I guess we'll see. And it just keeps on going. And it ends up turning out that like everything led to the next thing for a reason. And the moral of the story is there is no good and bad because you don't know the future. It's like, yeah, maybe in the moment something can be seen. And it was both. It wasn't just like something good or bad. It was literally like, who knows if it's good? Who knows if it's bad? Until I see how everything plays out, we literally don't know. And that's essentially just saying to not attach your own judgment onto the present moment, to just let it be. Because unless we see the whole picture, we can't possibly know. We can't possibly place a judgment on an event. And so it's saying to, be present. Just be. Don't worry about good, bad. Just let it. And again, it's like, this is a myth. This is a story that is like everyone hears this story. It's a little, you can pull it up on YouTube. Go on YouTube, type in story of farmer and good and bad. And there's going to be like 3, 4, 5 videos that have like their own animated versions of it. So it's like this story, and it's not just like a farmer and good or bad. There's like a bunch of different ways it's told, where it's not a farmer, it's something else or another, or it's a dragon. And, it's like this same idea has been portrayed all throughout the different cultures, just differently. And so it's like, this is an archetype that's being presented to us in a myth. And if you can see that it's more than a story about a farmer, his son, and his horses, that it's about how we ourselves will live like that and constantly be like, oh, that sucks, or oh, that's awesome. Like we just like hear things and we just quick judgment, like, oh, that's a bad thing. Oh, that's a good thing. And that we're not supposed to do that we should try our best to avoid that at all costs, because you have no idea like what you're doing when you're like attaching these ideas to something that is beyond that. Like imagine you're talking to somebody and they're telling you something, and before they're even done telling their story, they're like, oh, you're like, oh, damn, that must have sucked. Or, you're like,
Project.
Yeah, you end up projecting every time you do that, instead of just listening or just, allowing the story to take place. You're like almost like doing like this confirmation bias of like attaching shallow judgments to it.
Yeah, and you can alter their own opinions about the situation, and then therefore alter their futures and or your own future or limit the future possibilities by choosing a side instead of being open to both. And so, yeah, it's just going with the energies, allowing them to happen naturally as they do. You may not understand why they're happening or what exactly is happening, but you just have to trust in the process. And yeah, I feel like mantras definitely help. Like whenever you maybe you are experiencing a bad way of thinking, and then you can bring yourself back to awareness by saying a mantra. And so like number one thing for me is that I don't feel safe. Like I've had a lot of trauma in my past to where in situations I don't feel like I can be fully vulnerable. And so I'll like limit my ways of being in a situation because I have that unconscious fear like embedded in me. And so like a mantra that I say to myself is, I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm protected. And just saying that allows that to be a possibility when before it wasn't. So.
Yeah. I notice it a lot with like being late. I feel like if you end up being late, you can make it way worse by stressing yourself out and giving yourself like a bunch of anxiety, because then the next thing you know, you'll be speeding and you'll be making bad decisions on the road. And it's like, you can't change the fact that you're going to be late. And so sometimes there's like a funny one that a lot of people refer to as like the one, you brought him up earlier this weekend, but Gandalf, One of his famous quotes in The Lord of the Rings is he says, magician is never late. He arrives precisely when he means to. And it's just like this idea that in general, none of us are ever really late. It's like, if you're late, it's for a reason. And, that can like irk me sometimes, because sometimes it's like, no, gotta be on fucking time. And I try my best to be on time. But if I'm not on time, I'm trying to be very careful of like, don't make a bunch of bad decisions trying to undo something that has already happened. And so my mantra is like, when something is going wrong, I'm like, why did this happen? I like, trust the universe. Trust the universe. It's going to be okay. Stay focused, get where you need to be. But don't start running red lights. Don't run stop signs. Don't start cutting people off, because that's how the good and bad becomes worse, is when you start, it's like, I'm late. And then the next thing you know, because you're attaching like all this negativity to it, you are way more likely to make more decisions. It's like, you can be late, still drive safe, get there when you mean to, apologize, do whatever. Or you could be anxious the whole time, be speeding, and be pulled over by a cop. And then it gets 10 times worse. So like, there's nothing worse than being late and then being pulled over. Then you're like, so it's like, don't make things worse. Like, yeah, say the mantra, do what you got to do, so that I feel like when you accept that whatever has happened is the way it is, and to just like go with it and try to make the best out of it, that you're going to, like you said, open the possibilities of what the future can lead to. And I kind of just explained how by attaching a negative emotion to it, how things can spiral out of control really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's just with everything, like slowing down in life, because life can push you to move so quickly. And just the way that you're walking, the way that you're talking, like, there's no need to rush. And I feel like it stems from probably like whenever we had to survive and we needed to make decisions really quick in the wild. Maybe that's some type of encoded thing, that we have this sense of urgency all the time. But if you really slow down and focus on your breath, focus on your thoughts, focus on your actions, and choose the reality that you want to live, can change your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much got everything that I wrote down. I did want to like give you a couple practical insights of like, how can you utilize this gene key like right now to essentially enhance your life. One of them is a deep listening practice. Essentially, like, try to get better at listening to people. And how can you get better at listening to people? One, you can actively listen. That is a huge thing. It's like, just because you're hearing somebody does not mean you're listening to them. Like, one of my biggest things is if I'm talking to you and you start looking at your phone or you start doing other things, I'm just like, I'm done talking to you then. I'm not putting any effort into this conversation because you're not putting effort into the conversation. And people will be like, oh, well, I hear what you're saying. And it's like, no, you don't. My words are passing into your ear, but that doesn't mean you're actually listening. And what I mean by that is when you meet a true leader, it's like when you walk into their office, you're the only person in the room. And a bad leader, they'll keep typing on their computer. And they'll be like, oh, yeah. And then I'm telling you, the level of answers that you can get from someone that is one typing on a computer or one actually like looking at you and pretending like they care about what you say is completely different. The way that they make you feel is completely different. And so I know so many people that have this horrible habit of literally looking at their phone and answering text messages while they're listening to you talk. And I mean, it is what it is. I try not to take it personal because we're all addicted to the phone. So I just let it be. But that lets me know like the level of awareness someone is at. It's like, yeah, sure. Maybe, I'm not saying that they don't have a high level of awareness, but I understand that their level of awareness with me is not very high. And it's like, it's going to be hard for me to connect to you if every time it's my turn to speak, you get on your phone. And so again, practicing that ability of deep listening, man, that is like one of the key tenets of leadership. So it's like, just by learning how to not craft a response every time someone's talking to you, you could literally level up your leadership skills, which is a key tenet of like humanity. It's like your ability to inspire and lead is a huge character trait for anybody and anything that you do. You don't even have to be a leader to have leadership traits. It's like leadership traits are great in a follower. So you don't even I'm not even saying that you got to be leading people, but in order to be a good leader, you got to be a good follower. In order to be a good follower, you got to be a good leader. You got to understand both aspects.
Yeah, I feel like off of that, I feel like people, they get caught up in their minds in thinking of thoughts to respond because they're not confident in their own communication abilities. And that just comes back to like being humble. It's like you don't know where they're going to take the conversation. And if you are confused where they took the conversation, you can just simply ask them questions. Like you don't have to know exactly what they're talking about at all times. You can be like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, what did you mean about this? Like, I have no idea what that means. And they can go further into it and actually put you into the conversation with them, and you can be like a part of the conversation rather than just like, I don't know, have any idea what that dude just said, so I'm just going to say cool.
Or change the subject.
Yeah, or just not even acknowledge it. So it's like, just listen fully. And like something that helped me, I would literally have to like think about each word that they said and like say the words in my mind to like put me on the same page. Because sometimes you're just thinking thoughts in your mind and you're not on the same page. And it takes you a couple seconds to like actually get on the same page. And you're like, okay, wait, 1 second. Wait, what did you just say? And then it's just like being able to communicate exactly where you're at and where they're at.
100%. And then, one more idea, I guess not idea, but a way that you can, apply this would be like self-reflection. And I think self-reflection obviously can be applied to any of the gene keys, but I feel like self-reflection is a thing that most people don't do, and I think it is hard to do, to take the time to like look back inward and figure out like things that you can do. It's like a whole process. And death scroll on Instagram or watch Netflix. And so it's funny. There was a podcast on Andre DeQuan's, and he was just saying that one of the main tenets of Rosicrucianism, or an esoteric, is this idea that every night before they go to bed, they replay their day backwards. And essentially like go back through what happened. And it's like, man, how key is that throughout your life if you did that every single night, like replayed everything that happened throughout the day and then like analyzed it and then like figured out ways you could be better, do better. It's like, man, that would do so much for all of us. I know what you were saying, and I need to do more of it. I find that I get like key moments of self-reflection when I'm hanging out with you. We're constantly mirrors for each other, so that helps. But yeah, taking the time to do like 15 minutes of a rewind. And he had talked about like some importance to going backwards. He says it's like forcing yourself to replay things backwards makes you think about it more deeply instead of just like starting through the day. He said maybe you might skip some things, like you just kind of like fast forward, but if you go backwards, you're really forced to think about how everything came together. So, even that specific skill of like doing it a certain way, he said they have a very specific process of doing things. It's like they go from where they're at now, walk their way backwards, think about it in these ways. And it's like through that, he's able to gather more awareness about his conscious being and some of the things that he might harbor that aren't even truly himself. And I find this to be true when I talk to people who are really smart and they ask questions about some of the things you might say. Like sometimes I'll just say something and they'll just like ask me a question about it, and then I'll realize that I don't even really know that much about what I just said, or I'm not, or I don't, or I all of a sudden become aware that I literally just got that information from a podcast and I have no deeper information other than that. Like I remember I was telling my friend, I was just like, yeah, well, don't you think, what about this at the border? And they're saying that this is happening and this is happening. And he goes, well, how often do you think that happens? Like out of the amount of people that we're doing that with, what percentage do you think of those people is that happening to? And that one question, I was like, you're right. I have no idea. So he's like, you're right. He's like, I don't, he's like, I'm not disagreeing with you that that's not happening, but he's like, but what percentage of people is that happening? Is that 5%, 10%, 30%? And then what percent should it be a big deal? He's like, is it happening at 1 to 5% and it's being blown up into this huge issue, but it's some small aspect of this huge group of people that we may be helping? And it was just like, dang, I literally just heard this thing on a podcast and I'm like, we're funding terrorists at the border. And he's like, I'm sure that is true. He's like, but what percentage? He's like, and it's like, he's not even countering what I'm saying. He's just like, I think we need more information if you want to make a decision about this. And I'm like, dang, totally right, dude. And I'm like, I realized that the information I got is like it could be fifth party information. Who actually knows like the numbers and
bias?
Yeah. So and this happens so often, like so often I'll like be talking and I'm just like, I'm saying this shit as if it's true. And like, as I'm saying it, I'm realizing I'm saying it and my brain's like trying to figure out where I heard it from, or like where I got this information from. And then I'm like realizing as I'm saying it, and I'm like, man, I think the only information I have on this is what Joe Rogan said.
Super shallow.
Yeah. So
for sure.
I feel like that kind of it's that self-reflection, right? So you can even use conversations with your friends as like a way to like self-reflect your own ideas. And some people get so nervous when you talk about these things and like, oh, they don't want to talk about it, or they get upset. And it's like, you don't have to adopt anyone's ideas. You can hear someone out. And that's kind of like what empathy is saying in this deep listening, is you can allow someone to say what they want to say, and you can play devil's advocate, or you can go back with them, and you can even agree with someone. You can agree with someone and not agree with them. And it's not like a hit on you. It's like, I'm just trying to better understand your perspective, but it doesn't mean you got to be a freaking acolyte and all of a sudden like buy their books, but you can like, be interested in it. You can be interested in what someone is saying and not say that you agree with it, or you can give someone the space to explain their ideas, and you don't have to be like, oh, I don't believe in that, or oh, I don't think about this. It's like, you can still come to an understanding without being like, oh, this person is now this too.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like everyone has their own wisdom that they come to. And regardless if you agree with everything that they say, you can still find truth in something that they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And so just seeing it from, like we said, their point of view, and understanding where they're coming from and how they got to the answer, and can help you even by just seeing how they problem solved and got to the answer by asking them the questions. That can help light a different pathway in your mind of ways of thinking. And so learning better ways of communication for sure.
100%. That's all I really got.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting how it was saying how we always see the future as being uncertain, but they were saying the past is equally as uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just tie ourselves to these experiences that we say that we've had in the past, but there's like, with memory and the way that we remember things, it's just as uncertain as our future.
Mm-hmm.
That's just endless possibilities in either direction. But becoming aware of patterns, and we can see a better collective future. And I was saying that, the Mother Gaia will make a huge leap in consciousness, and this can already be seen in the next generations, how they're evolving. And it was saying that she will kill off desire, and that it will no longer be an issue that we experience in the human condition.
Cool. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Thank you.